Welcome to some new r/malicious compliance stories, where people comply to the letter, but not the spirit of a request. I hope you had a great day. The first story is called Can't Take It With You. It's been over a year since this happened. I used to work as a security guard in a large warehouse. Basically, my job was to stand at the exit and make sure employees weren't walking out with merchandise. In order to leave the building, you had to go through security. You had to have your bag checked and go through a metal detector. Also, employees were not allowed to take equipment home with them. Scanning guns, radios, etc. all had to stay in the warehouse. There was a notable exception. Certain managers were allowed to take home their radios/laptops if, and only if, they had a special badge which they had to show us every time they took equipment out. This was pounded into my head in training. No special badge meant they had to take the device back into the building. It wasn't our job to take care where in the building they left it, just as long as it didn't leave. If it was lost in the building, that was their fault. We had a couple of cases every week of some workers forgetting they needed the badge to take their equipment when going out for a smoke break and having to do the walk of shame back in to put it back. One day I'm standing at my post and a manager starts coming through toward the exit. She has a radio on her belt, but she isn't showing me a badge. I called out, asking her to show me her badge. I always gave them the benefit of the doubt that they had permission to be taking tag out, because sometimes someone who wasn't used to having permission suddenly got it. Well, she glares at me, but keeps walking. "Ma'am, I'm going to need to see your badge before you take the radio out of the building. Please." She keeps walking. "Ma'am, if you attempt to leave with the radio, I'm going to have to report it to HR and loss prevention." That stopped her. She called out, "Well, what am I supposed to do with it? My stations are all the way at the other end of the building, and I'm not going back. It's just policy that you can't leave with it, ma'am. We sometimes have people leave their radios just inside if they are coming back quickly. Well, I'll leave it with you then. Unfortunately, ma'am, I'm not allowed to watch your equipment for you. If there's an emergency, I need to be able to focus on that. You'll need to take the radio back inside, but what you do with it then is your business." "So, you don't care what I do with the radio, as long as it's inside?" "That's correct, ma'am. The rest is up to you, your supervisor, and maybe IT." "Okay then." She snapped the radio off her belt, wound her arm back like a bowler, got into a stance like she was preparing to bowl a ball in an alley at pins, and yeeted it into the building. It came to a landing and slid an additional 10 feet. Somehow it doesn't shatter on the concrete floor. "Have a good day." She then left, leaving me gobsmacked. Results? I had to write a report on the incident. One of the things we had to do was include footage of incidents from the cameras if there was any available. What was so funny was you could see the shocked look on my face, even though I was wearing a mask. My managers would sometimes take clips of camera footage to save to show the rest of the team for training purposes. That video of her attempting to bowl her radio and then walking out, followed by my very clear expression, was the top video shared among the guards for the next week. As for the manager, she wasn't fired, but I heard she got suspended for that stunt. I saw her going through a week later, with a badge. The next story is called Fit for Work. This happened to my mom about 10 years ago. My mother was a legal secretary and worked for one of the biggest law firms in my country for over 15 years. At the point of this story, she was about 2 years from retirement. She had noticed a deterioration in her eyesight and was struggling to work on the computer, read or do most of her day-to-day work. The firm sent her to an affiliated doctor, who said she was absolutely fine and can continue working. But as she was struggling, she decided to pay privately for a specialist. He told her that she was no longer fit to drive safely, let alone accurately read or use a computer, as she had multiple problems with her eye. The specialist told her to minimize time on her computer to an absolute minimum, as it was triggering migraines and other problems. She brought this report to the firm and requested either a change in her job requirements or to go on leave until she was again fit to work. But of course the firm had their own report. They said she was exaggerating and could absolutely keep working. But they very kindly told her that she only had to work on the computer 4 days a week from now on. 1 day a week she could just do filing. How generous. So she kept doing her job. But wouldn't you know it, when she was binding files for court, they were just a mess. Filing? Whoa, can't find anything. I know that she disliked several of the lawyers, so she was happy enough to deal with their anger. but she was very friendly with most, including one particular lawyer who may or may not has mentioned some tips to my mother on how to deal with the problem. Stuff like what she was entitled to after working there for so many years. So when the higher-ups inevitably called my mother in about the terrible work, she presented quite a compelling case on her rights, safety in the workplace, disability leave, etc. Long story short, she got fully paid medical leave until she retired, and back paid for any time she took off for doctor/hospital visits. The third story is called Phone Must Be Off. Happened back in 2015 roughly. I was working at a betting shop, a pretty large one that anyone from the UK has probably heard of. We were open from 8 AM to 10 PM. One big rule was mobile phones were to be turned off during work hours, no ifs or buts. Cue the morning of a big horse racing event and the start of my 12-hour shift. During setup, we had a problem with our internet. The tills, fixed out betting terminals and internal phone lines were all connected by the internet, meaning until it was fixed we could take literally no money. I waited and waited. About 3 hours had gone and nothing had improved. And I had no way of letting anyone know. My phone had to be off. At about 5 PM, we eventually had internet back. Not long after, I eventually got a call from my area manager as to why there was no money taken. After a lot of huffs and puffs, he hung up. I was just following the rules. A short while after, maybe about 20 minutes, I get another phone call from said manager, asking if I could take pictures of the marketing screens to make sure they had loaded correctly and then send them to him. No, I can't. Sorry, my phone needs to be off. He had to do a 3-hour drive to the shop to check himself. The last story is called Be Careful What You Wish For. Several years ago, I inherited my mother's condo after my grandmother, her mother, passed. After my mother's death a few years later, I decided to rent it out. The condo is part of a complex that is roughly 50 years old. Think garden courtyard style, with 2-story buildings built around an open courtyard with parking outside. It is pretty nice, particularly when the HOA keeps up the maintenance and landscaping. The units are owned by a combination of individual residents, absentee owners like myself, and one company that owns the bulk of the units. The company changes hands from time to time, but effectively controls the complex because they own so many units. Generally, they choose a good management company, and right now the property manager is very proactive and looks out for the residents, owners and tenants alike. Being roughly 50 years old, it is time to pave the parking lots again. The management company hires a paving company and sets up a plan to pave each lot in turn and make sure all the residents are notified well in advance so they can move their cars. An annoying process, but paving always is, and the lots are in dire need of being paved. And again, the management company is over-communicating, trying to make sure everyone moves their car, no one gets towed, and the paving stays on schedule. Well, someone apparently isn't too happy about all this. So they decide to call the fire department and report the paving for blocking access in the event of a fire. Judging by correspondence from the management company, they never bothered to speak with their on-site manager and address the issue. Of course, the fire department sends out an inspector. The inspector checks out the property and sees it matches with what was already submitted to avoid any issues and everything is good to go. Except, city ordinance prohibits grills, fire pits, tiki torches and other open flames on condo/apartment balconies. And of course, lots and lots of units have one or all of the above. So the fire inspector kindly tells the property manager and gives the residents a chance to remove the violating items and that he will be back to cite anyone who still has one. So be careful what you wish for, you just might get it. And with that, we end today's video. Let me know what you think about the stories. On a scale of 1 to 10, how would you rate the stories and today's video? I hope you enjoyed the video. If you did, please don't forget to subscribe and hit the like button. And I hope you have a great day. Stay safe. Bye bye.